What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Buck back with you. Buck, what is going on, man?
Not too much, DJ. Love the response to the ranking of the pods. I've seen some aggregators have picked up some of the conversations that we've had. That is always fun. And look, just to let the listeners know, like it's an opinion. It's an opinion based on like what we've seen around the league and how you kind of put it. But I just think it's always interesting when we do the tabulations to begin to talk about which teams are really going to be in the conversation to be title contenders, because we know it's formulaic, but typically if you rank you start winning the little battles, it's going to give you the opportunity to win the war at the end of it.
No doubt. And we will, we will knock out the head coaches on tomorrow's episode. Today, we're going to tackle the secondary. We've already got the skill players on offense done. You can go back and listen to those episodes if you've missed them. So before we get to those secondary discussion, ranking these by division, Buck, I did want to tell you, I've got one in the books. So I just started working on guys for next year. I always try and watch some dudes over the summer. And so the first one that I watched, I felt like I had to. I did Shedeur Sanders. So I got a peek at him, our buddy Dion's son. So I got a chance to watch him. And interesting, man. You can find the evaluation. I'll have a first look scouting report. It'll be on NFL.com here in the next couple of days. So I won't spoil the whole thing. But I would say a couple things. Number one, we have the numbers now in terms of talking to some buddies around the league. You have all of the spring stuff that they did. They went in there and got official measurements from a lot of these schools, and Colorado was one where they did that. So Shedeur was 6'0", 198. So 6'1" and a quarter, 198 pounds. And going through and watching him, I would say positive side of things, man, he's a pure thrower, like just a pure natural thrower. Reminded me a little bit of Stroud from the standpoint of when everything is just lined up, pretty consistently. Mm-hmm. He's accurate. He can drive the ball well. He doesn't need a lot of space around him to be able to drive the football. Just a real gifted thrower. So that's kind of the one thing I would say on the positive side. But obviously the negative, he's been hit a lot, I guess literally and figuratively here. Because of the sacks, like 52 sacks, takes a ton of sacks. They weren't good up front. Man, the backs struggled in pass protection. They just get run through. So some of those, it's not on him. He's got numbers that should match up, but then you just get your back destroyed and run over. Led to some of those sacks. So, but still holding the ball a little bit too much. And the other thing I would say is, if you're going to say area to improve on, start with the sacks. Then I would add into that just some of the short area quickness stuff. He's not super sudden in terms of being able to avoid, climb, and snap. And that doesn't mean I'm not talking about running a 40 fast. I'm talking about, think about guys like Brady, how efficient he was in short space. Think about Drew Brees, how he can just kind of climb and maneuver and get away from pressure. I think he can, it's something he can work on a little, just being a little more urgent, a little more demonstrative with his movement there in the pocket to get away from some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because I've written about him elsewhere in terms of like Shedeur Sanders QB1. It's so funny because our evaluations are very, very similar. DJ, and just watching him, like he does have like what I call a very natural feel in the pocket in terms of like playing the game in a traditional sense. Like he can make wild throws, he can come through in the clutch, he can do all of those things. Where you talked about like a little bit of like speeding his clock up, I talked about the nonchalance that he plays with. I feel like sometimes in the pocket he can be a little too casual, and that leads to some of the hits that he takes. More urgency would then help him get the ball out of his hands. So, hey, if I don't have a great line up front, then I got to quicken my clock to protect myself, And so if he can learn that and those things, and I just said he has to learn that. And for us as evaluators, we'll get a chance to see him. First, we saw him in the Pac-12. When now we see him in the Big 12, we'll get a better chance to really evaluate him because he dominated at Jackson State. He showed flashes at Colorado. If he's able to dominate in the Big 12, then you feel better about him potentially being the first quarterback that comes off the board next year.
Yeah, last year I think he was 69.3% in terms of accuracy. And I've never talked about accuracy numbers because it's ball placement league. It's not an accuracy league. You look at the college numbers, those can be inflated. Honestly, Buck, I would trade 69.3% accuracy at 52 sacks. I would trade for 65% accuracy and cut those sacks by 12 to 14. You know what I mean? Like just mix in some throwaways in there instead of taking so many negative plays. But again, I don't want it to sound negative because as a thrower, seeing the field, delivering the ball accurately, layering the ball, driving the ball, all the different types of throws. He is gifted. So again, you can find more of that evaluation. That'll be on NFL.com here in the next couple of days. But I just wanted to kind of wet your whistle, and it sounds like you've already done your work on him.
No, it's teaser because I mean, look, DJ, there's going to be so much conversation about him, and I'll be honest. Like the challenge in this is kind of like one of the first times that you're evaluating a son of a friend, and you're trying to be respectful of your relationship while also being truthful and honest. And so when Prime calls, you want to be able to give him the goods, the real. Hey, here's where he needs to work on. This is what it looks like, and those things. But I will say, he certainly has the potential to be a top 10 pick. It's about cleaning the other stuff up. And then the other part of it is going to be, and I said this, which franchise would be okay with the antics and theatrics that come along with being Shedeur Sanders? Meaning the boldness, the confidence, the cockiness, however you want to phrase it. Like, are you okay with that? And if you are okay, like, can you get him to rein it in to the point of being a professional NFL quarterback, if that makes sense? And there's no code language that I'm using, but really there's a way that you expect your franchise quarterback to act. And so, look, he's a big brand, but can he dial it in and be the face of the franchise that everybody will feel comfortable with? That's a bigger conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting just because you have so many guys that have transferred in and so many guys that have transferred out. So what that's going to do is it's going to provide a lot of opportunity for scouts to, hey, if you're in the quarterback market, you're going to be able to talk to a lot of his teammates at Jackson State, as well as the guys who were at Colorado last year, a whole new group of guys coming to Colorado this year. You're going to be able to visit with a lot of folks that have been in the locker room with him. They've been in the huddle with him, and you'll get a sense of that stuff because all the other, wearing the watches and doing all that stuff. I if the teammates swear by him and sign off on him and say he's one of the dudes and we're for him, nobody's going to care about any of that stuff. It won't even get discussed.
Fascinating conversation. I do love this time of the year because we talk about, like, we put the last class to bed. Now we're beginning to look towards the new class. So these conversations are always kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, let's get rolling here into the secondary. And again, remind everybody, secondary in this episode, we'll come back tomorrow. We'll do a quick one on the head coaches in each division. And then we'll have the tabulations and kind of give you where we are on these divisions and how we have them shaken out. Well, let's start here. Buck, you are up. AFC East secondaries, 1, 2, 3, 4. How are we going?
Whew, man. It's so tough. The easiest choice to me is number one, I got the Jets.
Yep.
Then I'm going to go with the Miami Dolphins. I have the New England Patriots, and then I have the Buffalo Bills. And that is crazy for me to say, considering the Buffalo Bills have been good for so long in the back end.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had Leslie Frazier on episode earlier in the week, and, when he's referencing Tre'Davious White, and then he's talking about Hyde and Poyer, and it's like, okay, well, this is a whole new era here for this Buffalo secondary. So I'm with you. I have them 4. I had the Jets 1. We agree there. I just had New England 2 over Miami 3. I thought that was a close one, but I'll tell you what, Christian Gonzalez, before he got hurt last year, was playing awesome. He's like a number one. He's a pure number one corner. You look at Peppers and Duggar as 2 guys that can do a lot of different things. They're versatile. They're very smart. They're very instinctive. So to me, those are key pieces there. I'm hopeful. We'll see my guy Marte Mapu get a little more run this year. Last year, he played sparingly. I was a fan of his just, again, because of the intelligence, the instincts, the ability to play some linebacker, play some safety, some nickel linebacker stuff. So we'll see how they incorporate him in year number 2. But I really like that New England crew. So I had it just that swap there with them in Miami.
The only reason, like the thing that tipped the scales in Miami's favor for me is obviously the Jalen Ramsey effect. And Kendall Fuller, who has really got a lot of notoriety and acclaim as being one of the top slot corners, bringing him over gives them that experience. But look, I can't knock what you talk about with the New England Patriots because you mentioned the guys like Peppers and Duggar, but also Marcus Jones, the nickel corner, who is, look, a freak show when it comes to being a returner. He's also another really good player. They have some talent in certain parts of their roster that really make you optimistic that at some point the New England Patriots are going to turn the corner.
One of the things going through and ranking all these, what I learned is there's a lot of good nickels in the league. Like when you're going through and looking at these teams, there's a lot of teams that have really good nickels. It used to be back in the day that was so hard to find those guys. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we're seeing, the the success, so to speak, at that position and a lot of depth around the league?
Well, I think when offenses started playing a lot of 11 personnel, it forced defenses to react and really treat the nickel position like a starting position. So it wasn't only in terms of like treating that in terms of, hey, man, you're a starter, but the way that we evaluate the position. DJ, when you and I were scouting, it was a separate category on the board for nickels, but a lot of times those nickel guys were just the guys that didn't necessarily make the height requirement,
Mhm.
right? So he's like, oh, he can be a nickel. Now I believe that people are really looking and evaluating the position as colleges are using the position, because we've heard like the star position for so long in college. Guys are now really evaluating the slot defender position separately from how they're doing the cornerback position. And it's allowed us to get a better product, a better player on the interior, as opposed to a guy that was a throwaway because he was a short guy who may not have had the straight line speed that some of the other guys had.
Yeah, that's a good way to answer that. Let's get to the AFC North here, Buck. This one is challenging. We're the point where I could make a case 4 is 1 and 1 is 4. But what do you got?
So I'm gonna go with Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cincinnati in order. Cleveland, just because Jim Schwartz showed us what you can do when you have three DBs that can legitimately lock up and play man to man. They can do it. Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson Jr., Greg Newsome, they are terrific in coverage when they go nose to nose and play. And then Grant Delpit has been a guy that can get around the ball. But Juan Thornhill, the guy the safety that came over from Kansas City a couple years ago, just the activity that he brings in the middle field. To me, it's an experienced secondary that is really showing a lot of expertise when it comes to how they play man to man.
Yeah, I just look. You got to flush the last game out of your head on that one when Houston was a track meet against them. So that was the only thing that was the tough one for me, was just getting through that. But I agree with you. I love the way that they play. To me, I ended up going Pittsburgh #1, which may surprise you. Cleveland 2, Cincinnati 3, Baltimore 4.
Mm,
And
interesting.
look,
Yeah.
and I say that, let's start at the end here with Baltimore. Nate Wiggins comes in, big time pure cover corner. Tackling was an issue and a concern of ours, but we'll see, how he does in that department. They intend to get the toughness out of people there in Baltimore. Obviously, I love the safety combo. Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams, as good as it gets. Brandon Stevens, who can do a lot of different things. You got Marlon Humphrey, who's kind of the old head there, the vet. You've got a couple young guys there, led by TJ Tampa. I'm excited to see how he kind of fits in there. So that's a good group, but I have them at 4. Pittsburgh at 1 is a couple things. Number one, Minka, just steady, reliable, the leadership, the production, everything about him I love. I think Joey Porter's on a rocket ship, Buck. I really
Yeah.
do. I had a chance to
Look
go out
at
and see them in
yeah.
training camp last year. And some
Yeah.
guys, you just out there at practice, you watch it, and you're like, okay, had nothing to do with his dad, nothing like that. I'm like, this guy gets it. He looks like a Steeler. He plays like a Steeler. He's going to be really, really good, man. And you mentioned the Cleveland, and I think Cincinnati too is a good group, and they steal from Baltimore, getting Geno Stone, who's a really good player, and Mike Hilton, speaking of nickels that are really good, a really, really good player.
Yeah, Joey Porter Jr. I said it somewhere. I said, man, look, I think he's the next coming. He's the next guy that we're going to talk about being a premier cornerback in this league. Early on in the season, DJ, he got those number one duties. And look, he didn't shy away from the responsibility of being the number one corner on that team. I love his length. I love his feistiness. And to me, he's a much better player as a pro than he was a prospect in college. And that is rare, that you see someone at the NFL level and say, oh man, he's a much better player than I ever envisioned him being in college. But he has that. And maybe it's the uniform and those things, but he has a toughness and a grittiness to me that suits what he's being asked to do in Pittsburgh.
It's a theme that we've had throughout this offseason. Unintended, wasn't something that we were focusing on, really kind of drilling home and making a point of. Buck, he's freaking smart, man. Like, you're starting to look at these guys that have transitioned well and have become really good players really young. And I feel like all these positions, other topics we've had this offseason, I feel like, man, this is kind of like the offseason for us of valuing the intelligence of these dudes, and how that translates. And it's come from conversations with coaches, with personnel guys, as well as just our own back and forth here as we're looking at rosters.
Yeah, no, intelligence is one of those things that look, you have to value it because it allows you to do so much more in the back end. And look, it's not only there, but DJ, just in general, if you have a smart team, Like the smart teams are the ones that always end up because they don't beat themselves. They kind of understand how to eliminate the DBOs, the don't beat ourselves things like the turnovers, the blown assignments, the stupid penalties and all that. Smart teams don't do that. They just kind of line up and they make you earn your way down the field on both sides of the ball. And so you're right. There is something about the smart player that we have certainly shown an affinity for this offseason.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's get to the AFC South bucket division you know really well.
Yeah, really interesting. Look, man, I feel like I understand the buzz around the Houston Texans when you continue to look at these personnel groupings.
Mm-hmm.
I got the Texans. I got the Texans first, the Tennessee Titans second, the Jaguars third, and then the Indianapolis Colts fourth. And for the Texans, it's the combination of the experience, the savvy, the athleticism, and then how all of the pieces of the puzzle fit together. When you watch Derek Stingley is as advertised years ago when he was coming out. Like, yeah, he's super talented. He can get his hands on the ball. He's smart, and he is surrounded by what I say are guys that are really, really, really good at what they're asked to do. Jimmy Ward, leader in the back end, super smart. Jalen Petrie, another guy who just kind of gets it and plays like a professional back there. You've seen Desmond King play for years, another vet who just kind of understands how to fit within the scheme. And look, Kamari Lass is going to have an opportunity to play and play early for them. I just think this is a very, very talented secondary, and D'Amico Ryans is going to have fun kind of mixing up some of the coverage things that they do.
Yeah, I had it the same with Houston 1. I had Tennessee 2. I think Tennessee, one interesting thing, when you look at Tennessee, you can kind of see a theme here. When you look at guys like, obviously bringing over L'Jarius Sneed is a really good player, but with McCreary, Elijah Molden, Amani Hooker, Chidobe Awuzie, those guys are all tough, man. That's a feisty, physical, tough group there in Tennessee. So I kind of like the personality that they've equipped that room with. So I have Tennessee 2. I had the Colts 3, and I had your Jags 4. An interesting thing on the Colts, Juju Brents is a second-round pick, is the highest pick that they have in their secondary. Yeah. So we talk about, our buddy Gus Bradley, and we think about coaching staffs. It almost, I don't want to say you get punished for being a really good coach, but you get, hey, you can make it work. We got athletes. Maybe we bring in some raw guys, some mid-round picks. Let's get the most out of them. They've been able to do that without dedicating a ton of resources there.
Well, I think what it is, if we do that same exercise and we look at their front, how many of those guys that are playing along the front line?
All ones. Yeah.
So what they've done is they've said, like Leslie Frazier talked about, hey man, I'd rather invest in the front end than the back end because I can mask some of the flaws of the back end by being really dominant at the point of attack. And until you pointed it out, DJ, I didn't realize that, man, they got all ones at the point of attack pretty much. Like they're dealing with Kwity Paye and DeForest Buckner and Layatu Latu. Like that's 3 number ones right there. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and look, Ode Ingbo, if he doesn't have the injury coming into that draft, it would have been a 1.
Yes.
I got him in second round. So they've invested resources there. It's kind of interesting to see how the different teams do it. How about the AFC West, Buck?
So AFC West, I go to Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers. I have the Denver Broncos, then the Las Vegas Raiders.
Same. That's the first time in a minute. We literally identical.
And for me, the Kansas City Chiefs, it's the luxury of being able to really develop their defensive backs that has allowed them to move on from a L'Jarius Sneed. L'Jarius Sneed, any other building, they would have overpaid to keep him because he played so well within the system. But because the Chiefs have had so much success with their young defenders, they've been able to move on and continue to do it. And we talked about it. We talked about it on the podcast with Leslie Frazier. Trent McDuffie is a bona fide star. And we had the conversation about smarts, instincts, intelligence, and how that fits. Check when it comes to Trent McDuffie. And it's one of the reasons why they're able to do a bunch of different things in Steve Spagnuolo's defense, because every defender that they have in the back end is a high IQ player, very instinctive player that allows you to really open up the playbook.
So let me ask you this question. If we just had a DB draft, just put all the DBs in the pool, said you can take anybody you want, is there a chance that Trent McDuffie's the first pick?
Oh, yeah. And this is why. And this doesn't have anything to do with Sauce Gardner, but with Trent McDuffie, you get a 2-for-1. Mm-hmm. I know I got an A+ nickel player, but I also know I have someone that can really excel on the island if need be. I can't say that for any other corner up in that top ilk in terms of being A plus outside and inside and knowing that. Yeah, I can talk about like we talk about Jalen Ramsey and all that, but I will say this: he's in the twilight. He's in the back nine of his career. Trent McDuffie is just getting into his prime, so that's why I would take Trent McDuffie like at the top of the board when it comes to these corners.
I just struggle to find out what he can't do. Play inside, play outside. You mean to tell me if they had injuries, he couldn't go back there and play safety? He can play anywhere on the defense. Cover, tackle, blitz, the intelligence. Like, I don't know what the knock is there, like what he doesn't possess. And that's why I'm just like, man, it's yeah. And you talk to folks around the league, they know how good he is. So I'm with you on KC. I had the exact same order. The Chargers. I mentioned it. I think I mentioned it a little while ago. But Asante Samuel, with all the different looks they're going to give up front with Jesse Minter, and if they can get home with the pressure, they have those 3 pass rushers off the edge with Bosa, Mack, and with Tui Pelotu. Asante Samuel can play. He can play top down and just use his eyes. He's going to pick off a zillion balls. Now he might give up some plays, but he is going to be like his dad, and he's going to make a ton of plays on the football, provided they can have that consistent pressure. So he could be one of those guys ends up in the Pro Bowl this year. Derwin James, they'll get him back on track. It looks like his confidence is sky high, bringing back Alohi Gilman, who's kind of like the control officer back there with all the communication. So some other issues, corners, those other corner spots, they need some guys to step up. But that's why I had them 2. And then you look at the Broncos with Surtain is still, as good as there is at the corner position. And the Raiders, I like a couple of their pieces. Jack Jones with the plays he made last year. Nate Hobbs, feisty, tough. Trevin Merrick is been a solid player, but I think they're the clear 4th in this group.
Yeah, no, look, they have some really good players, but yeah, they're backing it up. And they have the ability to do it because we saw those guys play well down the stretch for them. But in terms of just pure talent, I do think they fall behind the rest of the pack in their division.
All right, let's take a quick break. We come back, we'll knock out the NFC. All right, Buck, let's get to the NFC here. NFC East.
Yeah, NFC, this was actually much harder than I thought, DJ, when it came to ranking them because they're talented or notable names, but I don't know if their games still match the name brand value that we hear on the surface. So I'm going to go Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, then the New York Giants. I go with the Cowboys just because, like, when in doubt, I always tend to favor guys to get their hands on the ball, right?
Yeah.
And so in the back end, they have 2 guys that specialize in getting their hands on the ball, and Deron Bland and Trevon Diggs. The problem with that, some would say that they're a bit of a double agent, meaning that as many plays as they make for the Cowboys, they surrender to the opponent. And can you rein them in a disciplined defense that you don't want to allow the big plays? Because remember, Mike Zimmer is a lot different than Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is a great coach, but Dan Quinn allowed those guys to kind of play to their personality. Mike Zimmer's not going to go for that. So I got them first, but I'm admit I got an asterisk by it because I'm a little worried about Deron Bland and Diggs being guys that can hold it down after down after down without surrendering the big play.
Yep, I had the exact same order. So second division in a row here where we agree. But I will say this: at the end of the year, if we were to re-rank these, the performance of the rookies will determine the order of the secondaries. When you look at it with the Giants, with Tyler Nubin, one of the best safeties in the draft class, Drew Phillips, one of the best nickels in the draft class. Those guys are both going to play a lot for them. You look at the Eagles; they tried to address that secondary with 2 picks. Quinyon Mitchell in the first round. They came back, traded up for Cooper DeJean. There in the second round. So they're going to have a couple guys. And then for the Commanders, Sanders still, who's one of, Red Star of the Red Stars, like leadership, all that stuff, playmaking, intelligence, toughness. He's going to man the nickel position for them out of Michigan and Washington. So I think how all those guys play, that'll shake up the order a little bit of what that looks like.
Yeah, no, like you need your young players to play and play well. And this is the league where we're seeing, DJ, we mentioned it, like there's so many young guys that are being counted on to play prominent roles throughout the league in the secondary that we won't know how good these teams are until we get 7-8 games in and these guys get enough experience to be able to really play at a higher level. But you're right, though. Like the young guys are going to determine how well these teams play down the stretch.
All right, let's get to the NFC North.
Another tough conversation. And right now I have it Chicago, Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota. Chicago, because you talk about Jalen Johnson being able to be a stud player. I am a believer in Kevin Byard and a system that allows him to be a see ball, get ball player. Matt Eberflus taking over, kind of doing some of those things. To me, it works out. And I'll say, keep an eye on Tyreek Stevenson. I kind of liked him when he was coming out. I think he's tough. He's physical. He plays to that brand, and on a team that is all about hustle and sweat equity, he is the worker bee that you prefer to have in the back end.
Yeah, I had the same one. I had the same 4. I flipped 2 and 3. I had Detroit 2. I had Green Bay 3. Detroit, I mean, look, this is a young group in the secondary. When you talk about resources, they've put some resources in there. So they've done a nice job. They got a couple of my favorite corners in the draft. When you go to Missouri and Alabama and get 2 of the top corners in this draft class, that helps. So anxious to see how those rookies play. Kirby Joseph been a ball magnet early on. Brian Branch. They've got a lot of good young pieces that kind of all fit together. Carlton Davis now comes over. So they've tried to address this secondary here, both in the draft and in the veteran portion of the offseason.
Yeah, so the thing about the Detroit Lions is I will give Aaron Glenn a ton of credit in terms of shifting gears and switching his styles based on what he had. I know AG for a long time. AG wants to play man-to-man. They want to challenge guys. They want to make it very, very difficult for quarterbacks to fit the ball into tight windows, but they didn't have the personnel, so they had to morph and be a little more zone-centric. This offseason, they went all in on getting man-to-man guys. And what I loved about, like, the guys that they landed in the draft, about Arnold and Ricky Shaw and those guys, like being able to challenge. I mean, you just talk about being able to line up and kind of come after folks. I like that. I just like being able to go and get it. And I think Terran Arnold is going to be a guy who has an opportunity to really get after it.
A couple guys for the Packers keep an eye on in training camp. A couple big physical guys at the safety position with Oladapo from Oregon State and then Evan Williams. Both those guys, to me, big physical players. They took Bullard in the 2nd round, who I thought could be a nickel or free. You can use him in a lot of different spots out of Georgia. So they got 3 guys added to their young mix, and they are a team. When you talk about resources, you see a lot of high picks there, especially with Alexander and Stokes, 2 1s. Xavier McKinney coming over there. He was a 1, or actually was a 2, but was the best safety in his draft class. So they've got a lot of resources invested in that back end. The Vikings, again, we kind of had a theme with them, a little bit of a lopsided roster at this point in time, offense to defense. NFC South, Buck.
Yeah, so NFC South, look, I had it New Orleans, Tampa, Atlanta, and Carolina. New Orleans, really the thing that tips it is really just the experience. I can't say that all of these experienced players are playing at what we call a blue chip level, but I think their experience allows them to collectively play better than maybe the talent would suggest on paper. Anytime you have a corner like a Marshawn Lattimore that can play, you have a ball hawk in Tyrann Mathieu, who, even though he can no longer run like he once used to, he's always just kind of around the action. But to me, the guy that is the linchpin is Alontae Taylor. And I admit, I liked him coming out. I thought he was a really pure nickel when we watched him and evaluated him coming out of Tennessee. He has kind of slotted into that role. And with Paulson Adebo also kind of growing, I think the Saints have the makings of a really good secondary.
Yep. This is a jumbled division here. I ended up having Atlanta 1 on the heels of the Terrell Bates combination there. What those 2 guys bring to the table, I think they're excellent. So I had them 1. I had the Bucks 2. Again, Bucks have had some guys come and go, but they know how to evaluate this position. They've got a really good group there. The Saints 3, the Panthers 4, and the Panthers 4. This might be one of the better parts of their team. It's not a bad secondary. They've got a lot of good pieces there. So I thought overall, division-wise, that one was tough to sort out because I think they're pretty even. And again, I think the division overall is pretty even, and that's reflected there in the secondary. How about
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Buck.
No, I'm with you there. And I think the thing about the Carolina, they need their number 1 corner to be available all the time. If he's available, it changes the way that we evaluate that unit.
NFC West to round us up here.
Okay, now this is a challenging one, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to go with Seattle. I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers. Then I'm going to go with the LA Rams and the Arizona Cardinals. And the reason the Seattle Seahawks get into the mix is Leslie Frazier was very optimistic about what they have in Reek Woolen. And I'm optimistic in not only Reek Woolen, but how about Devin Witherspoon and what he brings to the table with Julian Love. And I know Rayshon Jenkins. We both know Rayshon Jenkins personally. Look, he's a playmaker. And so you put them in a defense that is going to allow them to have some freedoms to go get after the ball and just go make plays. They're going to do it. This team in Seattle, look, it's not the Legion of Boom, but they certainly are going to be a lockdown unit in the back end.
I'm with you. I had Seattle 1. I had San Francisco 2. I had Arizona 3. And I had the Rams 4. 3 and 4 to me was really, really close. And I ended up going with Arizona. A couple reasons here. I love the young guys that they have. Max Melton was one of my favorite players out of Rutgers they got in the second round. Again, they had so many draft picks. When we go through all these position groups, they're going to rely on a lot of these rookies. But he's in the mix. You got Taylor Demerson, who they got in the fourth round, who can make a lot of plays in the back end. We'll see if he can get in the mix there. Elijah Jones, Jaden Davis, a couple more rookie corners. Budda Baker feels like he's been in the league for 100 years. Still, it's just 17 when he came to the league, but it feels like so much longer than that. But I like their good young pieces there. Garrett Williams, a talented nickel out of Syracuse that they got in the third round. So in the previous year. So I think them and the Rams, I think the benefit of that is they've got two really good teaching staffs. They've got a lot of young players. And we'll see, how they continue to grow and develop. Also, a big fan of Quentin Lake, who we got to know a little bit in the offseason when we got a chance to visit with him. I think that's a big year for him with the Rams as he kind of emerges as a good young player to go along with Cam Kitchens, who they got in the third round. So, again, very close there. But I do think there's a gap between the first two, Seattle, San Francisco. And then I think after that, you can play around with the Cardinals and the Rams in terms of who you like better.
Yeah, no, look, the gap is there, but at the beginning, I believe this goes back to the conversation that we've had with Leslie or whatever. If they can get this Seattle secondary to play at a high level, this is going to push them back into that conversation, not only in winning the division, but kind of get in the mix, maybe do some damage in the postseason.
No doubt. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. We're going to come back tomorrow. Another episode will be a shorter episode where we will rank the head coaches and we'll have a summary of this little project that we took on here. So be on the lookout for that. We'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.